I'd like to welcome you to our webinar sponsored by the Wisconsin Council of Churches and the Milwaukee Interfaith Conference. My name is Reverend Brianna Elene, and I am delighted for you to join us as we learn about Afghanistan today. We are excited to have Janan Najeeb with us. She is the founding member and president of the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. For 27 years, the coalition has worked to inform, advocate for justice, dispel stereotypes, and build community in Wisconsin. Janan is a highly sought after speaker and sits on numerous community boards and committees. Under her leadership, the MMWC opened the Islamic Resource Center, a lending library and cultural center that hosts thousands of visitors every year. The MMWC also hosts the Milwaukee Muslim Film Festival at the historic Oriental Theater, publishes the Wisconsin Muslim Journal, and runs Our Peaceful Home, a culturally informed family strengthening and domestic peace project. Janan is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee's Frank Zeidler Award and the Dick Ringler Distinguished Peace Educator Award from the Wisconsin Institute for Peace and Conflict. Janan is married to Dr. Waleed Najeeb and has 5 children. And she has been running around, you guys have been very busy. And so I am so thankful that you have joined us today. And I am joined by my colleague, Sherry, and I'm going to give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Well, hello, everyone. It's so good to be here with you. My name is Sherry Hansen. For the past 2 years, I've been the program director at Interfaith Conference Greater Milwaukee, working with the executive director, Pardeep Singh Kalika. But now I have the very good fortune and honor to work with Janan Najeeb at Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition, which is where I am today, the beautiful temple that is our office.
So as we get rolling, I'm going to invite people. If you have questions that you would like to ask, go ahead and put them in the question and answer section in the Zoom screen. That way we can kind of get to them as either in conversation or at the end, there is some time for question and answer. So go ahead and drop them there. So I will pass it over to Sherry to get us started.
Well, I'd like to start out just by saying that the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition is the only community organization in the state that was invited to come to Fort McCoy twice. And actually that was Janan that went for a debriefing and a conversation with the women there. And so we really want to talk about Afghan in a way to understand the people, the country, all those details. And we asked Janan because she, again, is doing so much different forms of work around this process. So Janan, could we start kind of just, let's talk about the country and the people.
Well, first of all, let me just say good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, especially because it is Thanksgiving week and most people are running around trying to finish everything. So the fact that we have such a great turnout is quite wonderful. I'd like to thank Brianna and the Wisconsin Council of Churches, and I'd like to thank the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee as well for inviting me today. You know, Afghanistan has a very long history. It also has a very long history of being conquered by armies. It's a very strategic location. Many people may be aware because it sits really, it's sort of a bridge between Asia and Europe. And so unfortunately, throughout its history, it has seen many conquerors. During the 19th century, in fact, even Britain, which was very powerful colonialist empire had tried to annex Afghanistan in order to protect its interests in India at the time. But this led to a number of different wars. And then with World War I and the kind of just the being spread out quite thin, they lost in Afghanistan. Some just probably maybe notable things to kind of keep in mind that Afghanistan became independent, an independent nation in 1921. In 1933, Zahir Shah becomes king. He became king and he ruled for 40 years, and it was with relative stability. 1934 is when the United States recognized Afghanistan as a country. But then what happened is in the 1950s, the Soviet Union at the time really tried to get involved with Afghanistan by helping them militarily, helping them economically, and so they sort of got a foothold in the country, and they put in some rulers, of course, that were geared towards them, and more like puppets for the communist regime, and they were at times communist governments. What happened as a result then, moving forward into the 1970s, was that there were areas of Afghanistan, particularly many of the rural areas, that did not want to have communist rule and wanted to see an Islamic rule take place. And so that's where we start to see, things happen. And so in 1979, I believe it was, there was a revolt against the communist-backed government. And this is where you had, and then the American ambassador at the time was killed. So the United States cut off assistance to Afghanistan, and that's sort of where history began for the Americans, so to speak. For us, many of us probably, wonder when the issue with Afghanistan had started. It did not start on 9/11. It actually started way back in the 1980s. This is when the Mujahideen, as they were called, or the people that are, working to rid their country of these foreign, what they saw as foreign invaders, were being armed by the United States at the time, and we had the Taliban that were part of this. I don't know how many people might remember it. It was quite a long time ago, but the Taliban had even been hosted in the White House. And they were being armed by the United States. So it was sort of a bit of a proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union. This of course led to massive millions of Afghans that ended up fleeing as refugees to Pakistan and to Iran, which led again to destabilization, but then led to having that number of people living in Pakistan, which, many times as we're thinking about what happened since then and how Pakistan has somehow been involved in all of this, it's because they ended up with millions of refugees that were just living there, and so that's sort of where it started. It's a country with, as I mentioned, great strategic strength. It was a country where women were getting educated, they were in the universities, etc. But it began to devolve with a lot of the other political things that happened. And so I don't know if there was something else you want me to kind of follow up on specifically, or. You are muted, Sherry.
It wouldn't be a full webinar if there wasn't someone on mute.
You know how many times we do that? Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, that was a really good backdrop, particularly the Taliban piece. So I guess I don't know about you, Brianna, but I'm kind of curious about women's roles. You said they were getting educated, things were going in a certain direction, and then, you know, can you take us into like where that change occurred? I mean, I might be jumping a little bit ahead. I don't know, Brianna, if you have another question, but I feel like there's so much to get at here. And one of the topics was like where women are in this mix.
right. And that's really an excellent question. First of all, you know, we want to kind of talk about the fact that Afghanistan is, of course, overwhelmingly Muslim, and education for women is mandated in Islam. And so when you see that not happening, it's really because of whatever cultural practices, patriarchal practices, but not as a result of the faith itself. And so what occurred is, as some of these more rural individuals, the Taliban, and they were drawing many of these rural regions in and participants, there was a more you know, cultural attitude of women not needing to be educated, of women not needing to be in the public sphere. And again, these are aspects of patriarchal societies. One of the things that I think is really important to note that whenever you have countries where there's war and there's poverty and things sort of devolve, you tend to see that women and children suffer. You tend to see that because of the inability of many of these men to actually be able to control their own destinies or their futures as far as their political futures, it becomes then a power show on the women. And so this was one of the things that we did see in Afghanistan. And so many people remember, of course, the fact that under the Taliban, we remember the images of women, you know, not being able to go to university, not being able to be in political office, not being able, even girls going to school, having to dress certain ways. Again, this was something that was imposed upon them. But one of the things that I think is really, really important, and one of the things that I wanted to address, is that, you know, when we entered Afghanistan, especially after 9/11, it was presented in many ways. And if you go back and you look at a lot of the PR and the media, as if we were out there to liberate these women, as if, you know, we wanted them to get rid of their burqas and we wanted them to get back in school. But in fact, we were there as a knee-jerk reaction. Somebody had to pay for 9/11. And we didn't want to take the time to really think this through and to see how we could do it with the least loss of civilian life and destruction. And so we just went in there and bombed the hell out of them, basically. And so if you know, our goal was really to improve the lives of these women, we failed miserably. If our goal was to get rid of the Taliban, I think you know, what these last couple of months showed, we failed miserably. If our goal was just simply to get back at someone and make someone pay, well, you know, we have a lot of blood on our hands because we have tens of thousands of innocent civilians that have died in the process, and that's not even you know, taking into account all of our soldiers and the young soldiers that went there and lost their lives and lost their limbs as a result. So that's just you know, a very kind of brief overview.
Thanks. I think it's really important how you lift up of how messy and complicated this was. I think there's sometimes this really simplistic picture painted of like, oh yeah, the Americans went in to save all those women and look at how great. And then now, well, now we're going to leave. And the fact that you outlined of this has been years of war, and not like even before the United States came in, that there's been war within Afghanistan, and that it's not as simple as saving people, and how messy that is. Thank you.
And I think what's really important, what we often overlook, is that it's sort of the same kind of the other side of the coin of that whole colonialist mentality, the kind of the white savior, kind of we're there to save women from their religion, and we're there to save them from their men. So I think it there's a lot of information that was kind of not presented and lost. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind, I still have images of Jay Leno's wife saying that, we're there to kind of get rid of the burqas. And so, okay, so the burqas were not worn in the urban areas. These were more of the rural regions. And so many decades later, if you go to these rural regions, the women are still wearing burqas. So we have to get beyond constantly carrying our yardstick to the rest of the world and telling them that this is how they should live their life. But if we want to say, are the lives of women now better as a result of our invasion? No, they're not, because now not only have they lost so many of their children, their husbands, their country, etc., but now we've left the country in the hands of warlords as well.
So could you talk a little bit about kind of the withdrawal, and like how all of a sudden we have, I think the number I saw was 49,000 Afghan evacuees have come to the US, and maybe more still arriving. Could you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Well, I think one of the things that President Biden had made clear early in the year is that he basically said that we will be evacuating from Afghanistan. This is one of the things that, one of the platforms that he had highlighted. But what we did not realize is that you do not evacuate the soldiers and then remember to come back for the civilians. So the entire thing was a mess. It was, I think it was gut-wrenching to watch as people were hanging on planes thinking that they're going to actually make the plane stop and take them on. People lost their lives as a result. It was not an organized process, and it also showed absolute carelessness really for the people that had been working with the US military. All of these, you have to, cross your T's and dot your I's before you do an evacuation. That is not an evacuation. And then we saw coming to the military bases as well, here in Fort McCoy, and we hear all around the United States. It was the same thing. There was no planning. People were there for weeks on end, didn't have a spare change of clothes. They didn't have the exact, the foods that they needed. These are military barracks where people, dozens of people sleep on cots side by side. Well, you've got families, you've got, children, you've got husbands and wives and daughters and all these, and it really was poor planning. And I have to say, as an American, it was an embarrassment.
So to the question I kind of posed in the beginning and stuff when you went to Fort McCoy, so you're kind of setting up the stage to tell us what you saw the first time you went.
Yes, the first time I went, I had the honor of being asked to go with Congresswoman Gwen Moore, and actually we had Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota also joined us. And as all of you probably know, that Ilhan Omar was herself a refugee when she came to the United States. And so it was a delegation, and they gave me the opportunity to invite 9 women, 9 of the colleagues from the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition and individuals that we work with as well, to go and to visit Fort McCoy. We saw lots and lots of people. The bases are set up almost like neighborhoods. There were lots of soldiers and military that were there helping to move things along. People had to go to walk to a building to get their food. They had to, you saw that where they had washed their clothes and they were hanging them just from wherever they could put lines to hang them up. The first day that we went was a bit chilly, and we saw that overwhelmingly many people were still in sandals. Many of them didn't have coats or anything of that sort. We did hear during the debriefing from the commanders that they were not yet prepared. They were still waiting to get a spare a spare set of clothes for each individual that was there. So you can imagine when you have young children, and close to 50% of the individuals that were on the base are young children. So you can imagine here, when young children they're changing their clothes 3 times a day, and then these are kids that are in the same clothes that they spent a week in Kabul and waiting there, and then being transported, and then being sent to a different country, and then coming to the base and still not being able to change those clothes. So it's definitely problematic. And even an understanding of what kind of dietary restrictions and what is required, that was a work in progress. That all should have been planned and well established. At the base, the Major General Guthrie that briefed us along with his team at the time as well, told us that they had been a base of 1,000 individuals, which were mainly people that were working on the base, and then over 2 weeks, suddenly it went to about 16,000, because you had almost 13,000 of the Afghan evacuees, but then they brought in about another 1,500 military to help in the assistance of these individuals, along with others. So there are a lot of towns in Wisconsin that are not 16,000 people. Yeah.
So, then when did you start collecting things here at the center? And when was it between the 2 visits to Fort McCoy that you engaged Janan Refugee Relief Group and others to start bringing in new clothes and toiletries and things like that? Was that around like early September?
We had, because I sit on some of the state task forces, including some that deal with refugees, and I had the state refugee coordinator had contacted me. This was really when it first started happening. And she said, I think we're going to be in need of supplies. We're going to be in need of ethnic clothing. We're going to be in need of some of these things. So we just, that's not really our mission, but we mobilized, and we put together a really strong interfaith coalition and collaboration. We had dozens of establishments and churches and businesses and groups that came together to help. We decided that, these people have left everything behind. We're not going to deal with hand-me-downs and people's versions of what, gently used clothes are. We are going to get brand new items, and these are going to be gifts for these individuals. And so we ended up sending, I think it was 6 or 7 truckloads down there. So when we went with the Congresswoman, That was not the first truckload that we had sent down, but we went down there with a truckload. The second time we went was with Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, and we were a much smaller group, and we took a truckload along at that time as well. But I mean, there are groups across Wisconsin, and including, Muslim groups that have been compiling items and sending in different church groups as well. The need is tremendous. The need is tremendous. Even if you have one spare set of clothes, what's one spare set of clothes? And so I know that there was a lot of need for winter coats and boots. And in fact, we noticed when we had the group of almost 30 kids come to our center while their parents were being processed on Friday, that only 2 of the kids had socks with their shoes. All of them were wearing shoes without socks. And quite a number of them did not have coats. And it was really cold on Friday.
So it sounds like there's still needs, and there's even these needs as people leave Fort McCoy and start to be resettled in communities, that there's a vast need of stuff.
Yes, definitely. There's a vast need. And in fact, we're thinking that what we would do, rather than, deciding for these families that at least are being resettled what they need, I'm in contact with some of the groups, and I said, maybe what we do is get volunteers that can take them family by family to some of the area stores, and we will, we have been getting donations to cover the costs of them. Some of them need coats, some of them need socks, some of them need pajamas, some of them whatever they need, and to try and at least get a few items that they can use right now. The problem is that most of them are still sitting in motels. There are every week, there are individuals that are coming, some from Fort McCoy, some actually from other bases. I don't know exactly how they decide who goes where, but they're estimating, I think right now, maybe about 800 will be in Wisconsin. And so as organizations, there's only so much we can do. And we were, as I had mentioned, the first 6-7 shipments went to Fort McCoy. I think we're going to focus a lot on the families that are now being resettled here.
So we have a couple questions that there's one in the chat and then one we got in the Q&A kind of about that resettlement. What are some cultural issues that people should be keeping in mind if they say, hey, we want to help, we want to be respectful of these families coming into our communities? What should people be thinking about? And maybe what are some challenges that the families are facing and that cross-cultural conversation that happens?
That's a really good question. The evacuees that came, they are not refugees. They don't have refugee status, but the evacuees that came range. They're not one, big kind of like a monolithic group that you can just sort of say they're all the same. So they range from those that are incredibly highly educated. We met doctors, we met computer engineers, we met, individuals that know 8-9 languages. And then there are also a significant number, and those are pretty much what they have classified as parolees. And I hate that word, to be honest with you. But anyhow, they are individuals that were, for the most part, maybe the Afghan army or the Afghan police. They came from rural areas, so they have less education. They're more traditional in their interactions, more traditional in the ways that their gender roles as well. So I guess it depends on the family that's coming and knowing that particular family and being able to identify what those needs are. But some of the things that, of course, need to be kept in mind are, if you want to help them, what are some of the items that they're going to need, especially as far as food, dietary restrictions. These are communities that are used to rice, they're used to beans, they're used to halal food, or, what we call having meat that is slaughtered in an Islamic manner. So having meat from those particular areas. These are groups that, don't have alcohol. You find that many of them have particular gender roles. You may not have the women will not shake hands with men that are not related to them, and the men will not shake hands with women that are not related to them. You will find that their clothing tends to be modest. And they prefer ethnic clothing. Of course, not everyone was. There were people wearing traditional Western clothing as well. So I think each family is going to be different. Not each family is not going to be exactly identical. So it depends on where that family is coming from and how much interaction they had. If they had been some of the interpreters or the individuals that were working with the US military, they may be much more familiar with some of, the Western culture and Western practices and these types of things. Others may not be. It was kind of funny on Friday when we had some of the kids in our office. We've got the tiles in the hallways, but then my office has carpeting. And so a number of the kids, before they'd enter my office, would take their shoes off, so you have to kind of just keep an eye out for all of the different cultural traditions. But it is really beautiful to meet people of other traditions, because it just enriches you as you learn about other parts of the world as well.
I love that reminder of listening to the individual families. One of the things that has struck me in this is just the vast number of people. You mentioned earlier that the number of people at Fort McCoy, it's the size of I've said smallness, and maybe it's more of a medium-sized town in Wisconsin. Yes. And everybody is different, and there's diversity in that. And so having that curiosity that is required when you do cross-cultural work is so important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, that is what is important. And I think that as hopefully we're able to get people to volunteer and to assist these individuals, one thing that you're going to find across the board, and when we were there in Fort McCoy, this is what we heard across the board. They said, we did not leave our country because we wanted to run away. We had to leave. We had to leave. We did not want to leave our country. But now that we're here, they're very eager to work, to produce, to not be a burden on society. And so I think the more we can assist them in really getting established, the quicker you're going to find these are very industrious people. They have worked all their life. They want to work. They want to take care of their families. They want their children to go to school. And so the faster we can get that going, the better. Right now, there's a huge backlog. They're thinking that many in Fort McCoy are going to be there well into spring, which was not what was expected during our first visit. Our first visit, they said, oh, by November, we're going to have them out. Now they're talking about well into spring. It almost looks like a refugee camp there. And the problem is that housing is at a premium. It's very, very difficult to find low-cost housing for Americans, much less now these new Afghan, evacuees that are coming into the United States, to be able to find them low-cost housing, because they get very, very limited funds. And I think it only lasts a certain period of time, and that's to cover all of their costs, whether it's rent or whether, they need to purchase something. It's such a small amount. So they really have to get into the workforce. And considering how difficult it is to find employees by so many businesses right now, you'd hope that would move quickly, so that, a lot of these businesses that are suffering now can have employees.
And then there's also, finding places to live, needing credit, and all that kind of, gummy red tape stuff too. So, but Janan, I want to ask you about, so volunteers need a certain amount of cultural competency. And so are there programs, things that are kind of getting in place for that to happen? And also the ESL teachers, is there a call for that?
Well, definitely.
Yeah, speak English and want to start that process.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, you know, ESL is important. I know that when we went on the base, there still are there's no formal education, no formal teachers. And so coming to get people, you know, as they come here, for example, it is really important to be able to get them established with that. And as far as cultural competency, my organization, that's sort of like, that's our area. That's kind of where we have the feather in our cap. And so if there are churches or groups that would like us to do trainings for them, even if they're in different parts of Wisconsin, we can do it virtually. That is definitely something we can do. We had a woman, and I think Sherry, I'm not sure if you were here, when we had a woman that said, that dropped in the other day and said that her church was basically going to be taking on one of the families and she was going to be helping, and so she wanted to know what she should know. And so I don't know how the conversation got with the idea of you know, she was talking about Christmas and whatever, and I said, and one of the staff said, oh yeah, it would be, you know, it would be nice for them to see what that is like, but remember they're Muslim. She said, oh, really? So you know, some basic knowledge is warranted when you're going to work with a community. It is really important because you want to make sure that you recognize who these people are, the situation they came from. I think that as an organization also that works with refugees, that works with victims of domestic violence as well, we underestimate trauma and how you need to work with individuals that are coming from trauma situations. I'll give you just a very, very small example. When we had the kids on Friday, we realized, because they were here all day, they were here for like 9 hours, the younger kids were getting really tired. So we split them up and we said, okay, we're going to do a little nap time for the younger kids. And we laid down, you know, blankets on the ground, and then we told them, you know, to lay down so that they could take a nap. And they went berserk, and we could not figure out why they went crazy. They wanted to get out. They started wanting to open the door and get out, and they just, that was it. They couldn't. And then we realized after, you know, we started trying to communicate and to find out what was going on, they thought that we were separating them from their parents, and that they were this was going to be almost like a refugee camp where they were going to have to stay here and their parents were going to be separate because we're telling them they have to sleep here, you know. Assuming that, you know, nap time in school is everywhere in the world is naive, and it was naive on our part to not think about that. They never have nap time in school, you know, that's just not something that happens. So they could not comprehend the idea why they would need to nap. And we had just meltdowns with some of the kids until we were literally able to get an interpreter and have them explain to them and tell them, no, this is just for a short time if you want to. But all of them sat, and not a single one was willing to nap, even if they were exhausted.
Yeah, I was around for that. And earlier in the day, there was a little girl that after she was dropped off, thought that she was being separated as well. So we were able to figure out that her language was Pashto. The majority of kids we had that day were. And so we FaceTimed her dad on my phone. And, you know, growing up here and then really looking at this situation from these little child lenses, it was really something for me, you know, like what they're going through at such a young age, and then, you know, what's ahead. So, I mean, don't we just have so much love for them? I mean, when Janan showed up, they were all squeezing on her.
Oh my God, we had a love fest. You know, because in many Muslim cultures, you know, someone that's like, let's say, like your mom or your aunt, they will call you auntie. And so when I walked in, suddenly it was auntie, 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 you know, and everybody was lining up to hug, and they want, and then when I was trying to get to my office, I had a whole line coming in, following me into my office. It was wonderful, you know, but it was just interesting to
Because we had
it
been
was
there
a
all
lot of
day,
fun.
no hugs, no squeezies. I mean,
Yeah. And if you hugged one, then the other one is like me. It was very cute. It was really very cute.
And I love that image of like the growing family. I've encountered
Yes.
that in so many, like white American culture doesn't really have that, but
Yes, yeah, it is very, very common in, you know, in Muslim culture, that idea of that extended family, that even if you're not a blood relative, you'll be called aunt or uncle or something of that sort, you know, and so I think also some of the staff that were much younger, at times we're having a little bit of trouble getting them to do something. But when I came in, well, I'm auntie, so you have to listen to auntie.
that was true. Yeah.
is it the respect for the elders? Is that
Yes, yeah.
So we have a question in the Q&A, and we kind of talked about or you had mentioned about refugees and evacuees, and even the word parolees, and these different labels that people have. Could you talk a little bit about the difference between a refugee and an evacuee, and what's happening with the visa situation, I guess, is probably where that lands.
Yeah, you know, our hope really was that these individuals would come in with refugee status, because really they are refugees. But that's not what happened. They were not given refugee status, because refugees come in immediately. They have access to health care. They have access to certain funds for housing. They have access to you know, basically being able to work, all of these types of things. So that's not the case. We have a bunch of the evacuees, I want to say maybe a fifth of them, that are the ones that have special designated status. They have special status, and that means that that's because they had been working with the military, the U.S. military. They were interpreters, or, you know, in other types of positions, and so they come in with a special status, and that status is helpful for them. But then about 4/5 of them came in, and they are evacuees, but they were given parolee status, which is actually horrendous, because parolee status was only going to give them a very minor stipend for about 3 months, and then it's like, oh, go deal with it yourself. But it went through Congress, and they were given the benefits of some of the refugees. So some of the benefits are going to be up to 8 months, but they are still under parolee status, which means that after they've been here for you know, a number of months, they have to apply for asylum, which is a very difficult process. It's not easy for anybody to get asylum, but especially to have such large numbers having to apply for asylum. This is something that requires legal representation. You need lawyers. This is something that requires that you know, lots of paperwork, and they have to go through the process. And if they can't switch their process to being an asylee, that's really a problem. They lose everything, and so meanwhile they won't have anything. I think honestly that's unconscionable. These are the people. If this is how we deal with the people that basically were helping us and serving us, you know, I don't know. I really don't know what to say. So they're going to need, and you know what legal representation here, what lawyers cost to be able to do that. First of all, I don't even know that we have enough lawyers to be able to take on all of these types of asylum cases, but even to be able to cover the cost of these lawyers. So trying to find then lawyers that will do this pro bono work. Who's going to do all of this? You need an army to really take on all of this.
So I was going to say, maybe in summary, if you take the phrase, Janan, how can I help? Okay, because there are people that are with us right now that are feeling that. We've kind of sorted through, I don't know if we've missed anything here, but so we just threw out there that yes, in fact, we need lawyers. But in terms of volunteers, so in some ways, it might even be also better to just donate to the organizations that are putting some of these things together, right? So do you want to talk about Hanan Refugee Relief Group a little bit?
Yeah, well, I can go back to kind of what we had been doing, which was basically, we raised thousands of dollars from donors, and that's what we used to purchase the supplies. And nothing went to us; it went completely for that. It went completely for that purpose. You can always donate to us. You can donate to a Hanan Refugee Group. We have worked throughout the process very closely with them. In fact, what they are doing right now is they are helping the refugee resettlement agencies who are getting the evacuees, the Afghan evacuees, and they have been finding the apartments, and they have been working really hard to set them up. And they have a whole slew of volunteers that have been working really hard and around the clock for that. So I think helping in that way, and I think that also if the refugee resettlement agencies that are working at least in Milwaukee are the International Institute and Lutheran Social Services, I know as well, and they're looking for volunteers to help out. But if people can sign up as well to assist with the families that are going to be put in homes, they're going to need a lot of help. They can't drive, they can't go get their groceries, they can't register their kids eventually in school. They need everything from signing up for whatever it is. They need people that know English, they need people that can help them out, and every little bit helps. And the key here is really, this is an overwhelming situation, and we don't want people to come in and get overwhelmed and leave. If you can do 2 hours a week, you do 2 hours a week. But the key is to get as many people as possible, because they're going to need a massive amount of volunteers, and they're also going to need a lot of support, including financial support while things are worked out until they can get jobs or whatever the situation is as well. So, and like I said, with some of the funds that we got, we're planning to take some of these families to get at least those necessities that they really need, those extra clothes, especially for children, the coats, the socks, the shoes, the boots. Winter's coming.
And I'll share at the council, we're in the process of hiring a volunteer coordinator with the hopes of helping some of the good work that you're doing, some of the work that Lutheran Social Services is doing, so that we can help funnel resources in this time of great need. And so as people are reaching out, if you maybe reach out to an org, because many people are overwhelmed. There's such huge need, and there are so many generous people, and sometimes making that bridge can be hard. Know that the Wisconsin Council of Churches, we're kind of hope to help funnel some of that as well.
which is wonderful. I mean, this is, and that's sort of why even when we initiated the whole kind of truckloads, we said this is a statewide effort. This is a team effort. We're a community. We have to show up for each other. We have to stand with each other. We have to support each other. These are individuals that are going to be our neighbors, and we might not know them well, but their kids will be in school with our kids, and tomorrow they are going to be our teachers and our physicians and our engineers and everything else. This is really the American story.
So, Brianna, are there any other questions that we haven't gotten to?
We have one about language. Someone says they hear that many families have one English speaking member, but they've also heard that few people speak English. And you kind of mentioned with the kids about Pashto, but maybe some other languages. Can you talk a little bit about the language situation?
Yeah, there's a number of languages that they have. Pashto is the most common, and again, whereas the ones that had been working with the US, which make up about a fifth of that population, they know English, and some of them are very good with English, but then you have a large number that don't know English, and some of them, some of these individuals we're going to need to call on interpreters. There are some Afghans that had come previously, but Wisconsin is not one of the states that has a very large Afghan community at all. There's about, I think, 10 families in Madison. There's a handful of families in Milwaukee, but also then, trying to draw on them to help and assist, and find out then also from the ones that are resettled. We still don't have all of the information on the ones that are being resettled, because then we can take some of those that maybe they were interpreters themselves and try to set something up where they can help some of the other families. So that's going to be a challenge. That is definitely going to be a challenge. So I think that for those initial introductions, those initial kind of like calling on them as far as what their needs are, I think we will need to use interpreters, and then once people know that, okay, this person comes to my house every Tuesday so that they can take me to go and do my food shopping, maybe at one of the ethnic food stores, then you don't have to explain that every time, so then they'll know when you show up at their door that you're coming to assist them with that.
So one of the questions was about a special English language system. Our librarian here turned me on to something called Duolingo. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Brianna. Yeah. So Janan, is it correct that the main languages are Pashto, Dari, Farsi, and Arabic?
No, Arabic is not one of the languages. No,
okay,
Arabic is not. Yeah,
okay.
Urdu, some of them because they had been in Pakistan, for example, and then Farsi because they in Iran, there were many that had been in Iran. And as I talked just briefly about the history about originally when groups had fled to Pakistan and groups had fled to Iran, and so there was that mixture. And through Afghanistan's history, there have been times when Afghanistan and Iran at that time were sort of almost like under one empire, and so we a lot of times we like to draw borders according to how European colonialists drew the borders, but that's not really how borders are drawn. But I think I don't know a lot about teaching these languages, but we will draw on our librarian, who is also a licensed teacher, and we will also draw on those that have experience with English as a second language as well, to see about that. But that's going to be a process. But before you know it, those kids are going to pick up English just like that. If you remember, Sherry, just on Friday, we were doing just some songs where we were mentioning, heads and feet and things like that. And the kids were just, they had never heard these, but they immediately were catching on to that. So kids will catch on quickly. And a lot of times they'll end up being the ones helping their parents.
Yeah, it was the put your left foot in, put your left foot out, your left foot in, and check it all about. Yeah, so our librarian, her name is Destiny Hamblin, and after we got back over the weekend, I was asking her, how was it going with the language part of it? And she said, you know what, they pick up on everything. And we showed them videos, and then listening to the videos, they were already understanding, and they were learning so quick. I mean, they're just so resilient, and they're so brave. It was just really an amazing experience there. So.
Well, I think that reminder of immersion is often the best way to learn, and that call for volunteers of people to step up and say, welcome to Wisconsin.
Exactly. Yeah.
So go ahead, Sherry.
No, you go ahead. Do we have any more
questions? I have one final question, I think, that someone asked about the appropriate to offer tea to Afghan people.
To offer tea, that's like the go-to drink. We were doing a training for a group, and we were using pictures, and we said, the go-to drink in America is a beer. The go-to drink in many Muslim cultures is a cup of tea, and so that is definitely offering tea. We may there are very few people that do the American tea kind of style where you just have hot water and drop a bag into it. That's not really called cooking your tea. That's kind of like, your sort of McDonald's version of tea. So have them brew you a nice cup of tea, and then you'll really know what tea is.
I love that. I'm looking for, I'm already like, can I come drink some tea? Well, I want to say thank you so much. I feel like we've learned so much in this last hour, and there's also so much more to learn, right? It's this ongoing process. So if folks wanted to learn more, the council is continuing to help put out some resources, and I hope we can keep this relationship going with the coalition, and also to reach out that you guys have so much going on and are always offering stuff. And so I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful. And just for your audience, we are here. We are here to help. So if you have questions that come up, if you end up being one of the places that host a family, please do feel comfortable contacting us about any question. There's nothing that's silly. There's nothing that, that shouldn't be asked. On the contrary, the only bad question is the one that is not asked, and we're here to help.
And I would recommend the most current information is on the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition Facebook page. So if you want to know
that in the chat.
Okay, that's just great. Yeah, I was just kind of pointing people in that direction. But anyway, thank you, Brianna, for hosting this, and Wisconsin Council of Churches. Just really terrific to be here with you, Janan, as well. Yeah,
and we tried to put you in the kind of quietest place, Sherry, but it looks like, man, there is no quiet place in this center.
Yeah, it's over. There's like a party starting with tea, and so it's all good. It's all good.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful holiday, Thanksgiving.
Yes, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone.
All right.